Hey there. In this video I want to show you how to install Visual Studio 2019. Now this is especially for people who have never used an IDE before, an integrated development environment, maybe new to programming completely, maybe you're wondering how you even get started with the tools. This is for you. And I want to go through the process today to show you just how easy it is. Here I am at Microsoft's Bing search engine, and we're going to search for Visual Studio 2019. Go ahead and type it in and press enter. And you can see there it is near the top of the search results, as you would probably expect for Bing. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. And it's actually visualstudio.microsoft.com vs. Let's go ahead and expand that. And you can take a moment to look through the page if you like, find out some more about the system. But right now, let's go ahead and download it. And it's giving us a few choices: Community, Professional, and Enterprise. Community is actually the free version that you can download for your own use. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that one. And it should be starting shortly. There it goes. It's downloading the installation file, and it's already downloaded it, so I'm going to go ahead and click on Open File, and this is just the installation file itself that will download the rest of the content. So let's go ahead and click yes on that. So now it's downloading the initial files, and this just takes a moment. And here we go. Now it's presented us with a list of the different components that can be installed. The Visual Studio 2019 installation focuses on workloads. It looks at the type of programming that you're going to be doing, and it lets you select from different types, and it will choose the components for you. And there are a lot of little components within the system, so that's why they've set this up so that you can just tell it what you want to do with Visual Studio 2019, and it will take care of the rest. Let's start with ASP.NET and web development. That's if you're developing websites and applications with C# or one of the other Visual Studio languages. Going to go ahead and click on that. And you see over here on the right, it's selected all the necessary components for that. And it will install those when we're ready. And you notice down here, it shows how much space it's going to require on the hard drive. So you probably want to set aside some space for this, as well as some time to install, because it will take a certain amount of time to download all of this information. I'm going to skip Azure development, not going to be working with that right now. It has some non-Microsoft technology such as Python and Node.js. I'm not going to be working with those right now. I am going to be working with .NET desktop development. So I'm going to select that, and you notice over here it's added the components. I'm not going to be using C++, so I'll skip that. Universal Windows Platform Development is essentially the modern Windows applications for Windows 10 and mobile devices maybe, and it shows those full screen Windows applications that you might have noticed, as opposed to the old desktop application. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I'm not doing mobile development with .NET right now, so I'll leave that for later. You can always come back to this after you've completed the installation, and you can update components, so you don't have to stress too much over what you're installing initially. You can add new components, or you can remove existing ones, and you can change the way it's set up so that it can adapt to whatever you're doing at the time. And I am going to select Game Development with Unity. And as we scroll down here, I think I will select Data Storage and Processing. I do a lot of work with databases. I'm not working with Python, so I'm not going to use Data Science. I'm not looking at making extensions with Visual Studio or SharePoint or Office. And that's pretty much it for what I plan to do right now. So as you can see, it's going to require about 23 gigabytes on the hard drive. It's selected all the necessary components, and we can actually come over to the individual components tab and take a look at all the individual components that it's going to install. It's selected those based on the choices that I made. You can see there are quite a few. If you need to install other language packs, you can do that. You can change the installation locations if you need to, but I just leave it with the defaults for simplicity's sake. So let's go back to the workloads and let's come down to install. You can see that it's going to install while downloading. It's going to start downloading the stuff, and as it downloads each component, it's going to go ahead and begin the installation process. So that will save some time. And you do want to set aside some time for this because it's probably going to take anywhere from a half hour to an hour depending on what you select. So let's go ahead and click on install. And you can see that it's starting to download the components. I have a relatively fast connection, but it's still going to take a little while, so I will fast forward through this. While we're waiting for that, let's go ahead and take a look at the requirements for Visual Studio for just a second. Let's go back to the search engine, type in Visual Studio requirements, and there it is, first link in the results. So it brings up this page from docs.microsoft.com, and you can scroll down here and it gives you the download links again. But coming down here, we can see that it actually runs on Windows 7 and higher. So if you have Windows 7 SP1 or later, then you should be able to run it. It requires at least a 1.8 gigahertz processor and at least 2 gigabytes of RAM, but really you're probably going to need 8 gigabytes or more, which you probably do have at this point. Again, you saw the hard disk space that it was setting aside. You're probably going to need about 20 gigabytes set aside to install any real options, as you saw earlier. And it has the other requirements that you can scroll through as you need to. But really, if you have a decent system with, again, Windows 7 or later, about 8 gigs of memory, you should be able to run it without a problem. Any of the newer home systems within the last 2 or 3 years should not have a problem at all. Okay, as you can see, it's finished downloading and it's just installing the remaining packages. So that should take just a little bit longer. And it's just wrapping up now with the last few components, going through the final installation routine. And now it's opening Visual Studio, finished installation, and it's asking for a sign-in. If you happen to have a Microsoft account, it can come in handy. You can synchronize your settings across different computers. You can gain access to a couple of other features. I do have one, but for right now, I'm just going to skip this and go on to Visual Studio itself. You can select your environment based on the technology that you're working with. I'm going to select Visual C#, and it will make the tools specifically for that language more available. I like the dark theme, so I'll go ahead and select that and start Visual Studio. I said earlier that you could come back to the installer and change the components that are selected so you can add and remove components as you need to. Let's go ahead and close this down. And let's come over to the Start menu. Let's see what it's added. And come down here to Visual Studio 2019, and we also see the Visual Studio installer. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And it comes right back to this program, and you can select Modify, and the program will bring you right back to the Workloads section where you can deselect or select different components and update the installation. So it's pretty simple to modify the configuration as you need to. Of course, you're going to have to pay attention to the amount of space required and set aside some time because you might have to download additional components. Now, it might take a little bit longer when you're running it for the first time. It has to do a number of things in the background. So Just have a little bit of patience and it'll open soon enough. Here we go. Now it comes up to the splash screen, and there's a number of things that you can do. You can work with code repositories or open an existing solution. I'm going to go ahead and select Create a New Project. And you can see the large number of options that are available. I'm going to select C#, Windows, and Desktop. And I'm going to go ahead and select the console project, which is a good one to start out with if you're just getting into programming. And if you have trouble finding one, you can always type in the name up here, so console. And here we go, console application. And I'm going to click next. I'm going to name this one Sandbox. I'm going to put it on the Windows desktop and then click next. Now it asks which .NET framework that you want to target. There are a number of versions. I'm going to select the latest one, .NET 5.0. Click Create, and it just takes a few extra moments to create the project. And it's all set up. So this is Visual Studio 2019 itself. And if you're new to programming, if you haven't worked with an IDE before, it might look a little bit intimidating. The only thing I'm going to tell you for right now is to focus on just a few different parts. This is your main work area. When you're working with code, or if you're working with a Windows Forms solution, this is where you'll be doing most of your work. As you can see, it's set up the initial code. You have the class here with a basic subroutine. This is a Hello World program. If I run it, what it's going to do is pop up a console application. And it simply prints out Hello World. That's a classic first application for developers. And it asks me to click any key, so I'll just close that down. So that's the main work area. Over here you have the Solution Explorer, which simply shows all the different components within your project. And you can show all files, it will show everything. And that's essentially a representation of the files within the project itself. You can see over here, it created the project, it assigned it a group of folders, and it's a fairly simple setup, and that Solution Explorer is basically a representation of that. Then down here you have the Properties panel, which will show you the properties for any object within the solution that you're working with. Now the menus seem fairly complex. There's a lot of different options because there's a lot of different types of projects and solutions that you can work with, so there's something for everybody, but don't try to understand all of that at once. Really focus on the basic parts of the IDE as you learn whichever language you're working with, and then let yourself learn as you go. You don't have to know everything all at once, and whatever you do, don't let yourself be intimidated by the software itself, because everybody starts out not knowing too much and just discovers as they go. So that's a basic introduction to installing Visual Studio 2019. I hope it's been helpful. Have fun coding.